Earlier, we reported that ISIS leaders called for more attacks during the holy month of Ramadan, which ends in roughly 8 days. But just yesterday, ISIS claimed responsibility for 3 other attacks, including Yemen, where at least 43 people were killed in a string of attacks. Then a suicide bomber in Jordan killed at least 7 more. And in Lebanon, 4 Islamic State militants reportedly blew themselves up in a Christian-dominated city. 5 more people died there. And now we have this in Turkey. Joining me now, former Islamic extremist Maajid Nawaz, who now helps fight against terror, and Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who's author of Defeating Jihad. Good to see you both. So let me start with you on this, Dr. Gorka, because what happened over the weekend is ISIS lost Fallujah in Iraq, and they've lost Ramadi. They've lost other key cities, including Anbar province. Basically, what they hold now in Iraq is Mosul. And there's a question about whether this explosion in attacks is somehow in retaliation for that, or they're getting more desperate as they lose more territory, in particular in Iraq.
Right, Megan. So since the advent of the modern jihadi movement that really is born in 1979, there's always been 2 target sets. There have been the near enemy, so that's the Middle Eastern targets, the people who are apostate leaders that they wanted to kill and then establish their caliphate in that territory. And then there was the far enemy, the infidel, us, whether it's targets in Western Europe, whether it's targets in the United States. So here we have a very interesting challenge. This is the first ever jihadi group ever in 90 years to establish successfully a caliphate, a theocratic empire. This is what they did 2 years ago in Mosul. And at the moment, they seem to be losing. They've still got Tikrit, they've still got Mosul, which is a very, very important city in Iraq, but there have been inroads made against them. So now it is very plausible that in some kind of displacement reaction, in some kind of distraction to their losses against the enemy in the Middle East, they're taking the fight to the infidel. They're taking the fight to us, whether it's in Orlando, San Bernardino, or now in Istanbul.
Maajid, what is your understanding of their thinking? As they lose territory, would they expand their attacks, or do you believe they'd be expanding in this way and going after these different targets, irrespective of what was happening in Iraq?
No, I think the 2 are linked. I would also add that there's a broader geopolitical aim. ISIS knows full well that it can sow the seeds of chaos through such attacks in the West and in Turkey. So let's take this attack today in Turkey, where up to 50 could be dead. Now, that will have reverberations, not just obviously inside Turkey and for those tragically who've lost their lives and generally for the Turkish people, but also across Europe. Just imagine how that's going to play out with all the seismic shifts that are currently going on in Europe, with the rise of nationalistic sentiment and people fearing being part of broader coalitions and unions and blocs. People will end up retreating back into their own identities and not wanting anything to do with those they have defined as the other, in reaction to a fear that perhaps terrorists are going to be sneaking over borders. And that could potentially lead to a further breakup of the European Union. ISIS is fully cognizant of that fact, and it's something that they would indeed aspire to. And so really the reverberations of this, the shockwaves of this, will be felt across the continent of Europe, and that has political consequences for the stability of Europe as well.
Dr. Gorka, how concerned, do you think, obviously we always worried a bit about terror, but given what they're saying about Ramadan, and we've got, until I think July 6th to go until that ends, how concerned should people here be?
Very, very concerned. Maajid is absolutely correct. This will have broad political ramifications and ramifications for national security. But, Megan, it should not have surprised anyone. Absolutely nobody should be surprised. A year ago, in June 2015, there was a publication of a Turkish-language ISIS magazine named Constantinople, where they talked about the conquest of Constantinople, the need to recapture the home of the Ottoman Empire, to cleanse it of false Muslims. We know they've talked about attacks during Ramadan, and most specifically of all, and this is why Orlando shouldn't have surprised anybody, they they have been explicit in their publications in English. We are going to take the fight to the jihadis where there are high concentrations of unarmed civilians. That is right here on U.S. soil. And remember, Omar Mateen is the 103rd ISIS individual intercepted or killed or arrested on U.S. soil in the last 2 years. 103rd, Megyn.
That brings it home. Gentlemen, thank you both so much.